Nolan Wells update, mysterious letter surfaces. What did it really reveal? A handwritten letter, 2 pages, floating across the internet with no verified author, no timestamp, no chain of custody. And yet, the people who have read it carefully, the ones who have followed this case from the very beginning, keep saying the same thing. It sounds too specific to be fiction, it sounds too detailed to be coincidence, and it sounds too close to what Nolan Wells' own family has been saying since the summer of 2026 to be dismissed without serious consideration. This is not a rumor. This is not manufactured drama. This is a document that has surfaced in connection with the disappearance and death of Nolan Xavier Wells, a young man from the Mississippi Gulf Coast who went to Horn Island on the 4th of July and never came back alive. And what this letter describes, if any part of it holds truth, changes everything about how we understand what happened on that island. Before we go any further, if you are new here and this is the first time you are hearing about Nolan Wells, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Unrivaled True Crime and hit that like button right now, because we do not let these cases fade into silence. We stay on them. We stay on Nolan. Now let's get into it.
Here with a Nolan Xavier Wells update, and there's this odd letter. It looks like a journal entry that just hit the internet. Let me know what you guys think. It says July 4th, we go to the party, the island, we had alcohol. I may have drank half, if not a whole seltzer throughout the entire time. Was worried about returning for his second season, and he didn't want to ruin his chances. Cell service sucks here. Imagine something happening to you and not being able to call out for help. Nolan side-eyes and dismisses the comment. Nolan snaps a photo or a video of scenery or something. Wyatt had been sniffing the bug shug all morning. Wyatt tries to grab his phone and has to put it, and Nolan jerks his phone because this feels like what would lead to Nolan's death later. Approximately 12 hours later, Nolan was already hanging on an inkling he shouldn't go to the pool party. Him and Wyatt have had some animosity for a while because Nolan was back and forgave easily and didn't hold grudges. He was the peaceful friend, the conflict solver in most of his social group. He had several, maybe 3 friends, grumps. I can't read the rest of that. Nolan was only put on the boat to be transferred back to the island around 3 to 5 a.m. July 6th. That's why he wasn't found initially on the island. He was stored somewhere cool and dark to keep from decompositioning a minute, but it was summer. He already started to have a hint of smell permeating the shaded area. It's an area of property him and his friends hiked or hung around in, and yes, it's one of his friends' properties. Somebody got a farm or hiking trail, maybe both. Somebody cried, somebody is scared to speak, somebody was threatened. All of them are being haunted. Nolan decided to unfriend this group, and they couldn't accept it, the ultimate motive. Again, it's hard to read this letter. The writing kind of looks that of a female. I don't know. What do you guys think about this?
The letter reads like a journal entry. The handwriting has been described by those who have examined it as appearing to belong to a female, though that determination has not been confirmed by any forensic analysis. It is written across 2 pages, portions of which are difficult to read, either water-damaged, smeared, or faded in ways that obscure key passages. What can be read, however, tells a story that begins on the 4th of July and ends with a claim so precise that it reframes the entire timeline of this case from the ground up. The letter opens with a date, July 4th. It places the events at a gathering on an island, Horn Island, sitting off the coast of Ocean Springs, Mississippi, a remote barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico, accessible only by boat, no permanent structures, no running water, and cell service that, as we will examine in detail shortly, has become one of the most fiercely contested details in this entire investigation. The letter describes alcohol being present at the gathering. It notes that the individual it centers on, and the context of the letter makes clear that individual is Nolan, consumed very little throughout the evening. Half a seltzer, it says, maybe a full one at most, across the entire time they were there. The reason cited is deliberate and telling. He was worried about returning for a second season. He did not want to do anything that might compromise his chances. Nolan was careful that night. He was not reckless. He was not careless. He was a young man actively protecting his future. The letter then records something that, on its surface, sounds like an offhand remark made during a casual holiday gathering. Someone comments on the poor cell service on the island. The words, as the letter frames them, carry a pointed edge, something to the effect of imagining what it would be like if something happened to you out here and you couldn't call for help. And Nolan, according to this letter, side-eyes the person who says it and dismisses the comment without engaging. He does not escalate. He observes. He moves forward, because that is precisely who Nolan Wells was. But the letter does not move forward from that moment easily. It treats that comment as significant, as a signal of something already present in the air that day, a tension with roots reaching back well before one holiday weekend on Horn Island. What follows in the letter is a description of a physical confrontation, not a full fight, but a moment of aggression that the letter's author clearly believes set the trajectory for everything that came after. An individual identified in the letter as Wyatt had been, in the author's words, sniffing bug spray all morning. Wyatt then attempts to grab Nolan's phone. Nolan pulls it back. The letter's author frames this moment as a precursor, something directly connected, in their view, to Nolan's death approximately 12 hours later. 12 hours. The letter is explicit about the dynamic between Nolan and Wyatt. It frames the tension as one-sided, driven more by Wyatt than by Nolan. Because Nolan, the letter says, forgave easily. He did not hold grudges. He was the peaceful one, the conflict solver, the person in the group who kept relationships from fracturing when they should have broken apart entirely. There is documented video footage of Nolan doing exactly this, stepping into a physical altercation involving others and de-escalating it, with his presence and composure alone. The letter also notes that Nolan was already carrying a feeling that day that he should not go to the pool party planned for later. Something in him was signaling caution, but he went anyway, because Nolan did not retreat from discomfort. He leaned into connection, even when the connections around him were becoming complicated. And then the letter arrives at its most staggering claim. It states that Nolan was only placed back on a boat and transferred back to Horn Island between approximately 3 and 5 in the morning on July 6, 2026, not the night of July 4th, not July 5th. The early hours of July 6th. The letter states this directly. That is why he was not found initially on the island, because he was not on the island during those initial hours, not at first. The letter claims that in the intervening time, Nolan was stored somewhere cool and dark. The location is described as an area of property that Nolan and his friends had hiked or spent time on, and the letter is specific about this. It was one of his friends' properties. The stated purpose of storing him there was to slow decomposition, but the letter's author acknowledges the limitations of that effort. It was summer. Even in shade, even in a cooler location, the process had already begun. The letter describes a hint of smell already permeating the shaded area where he had been placed. The motive offered by the letter is not heat-of-the-moment fury. It is something more premeditated in its framing. The letter states that Nolan had decided to distance himself from the group, to walk away from them entirely, and they could not accept it. That, according to the letter's author, is the ultimate motive. The letter closes its account with observations about those who were present. Somebody cried. Somebody is scared to speak. Somebody was threatened. And all of them, the letter says, are being haunted. This letter has not been authenticated. That is not a protective qualifier. It is simply the documented truth. Its origin is unknown. The author's identity is unknown. It appeared online without attribution or verification. What makes it impossible to entirely set aside is that its specific contents align with inconsistencies that Nolan's own family identified and stated publicly from the very first night he went missing, long before this letter ever surfaced. From the beginning, the family was given two central explanations by Nolan's friends. The first was that Nolan had chosen to remain on Horn Island because he had met a young woman named Katie and wanted to stay and spend time with her. The second was that Nolan had willingly left his phone with his friends because there was no usable cell service on the island. Nolan's father, Nolan Wells, addressed both of these explanations directly and on the record. On the matter of Katie, his position was clear and immediate. His son would never do that. Staying behind on a remote barrier island, at night, without his phone, for a girl, that was not consistent with Nolan's character. That was not how he was raised. And critically, the reporting on Katie's own account contradicts the friend's version entirely. According to what has been reported, Katie stated that Nolan told her he was going to leave with his friends. He was not planning to stay behind. On the matter of the phone, Elmore was equally unequivocal. Nolan did not leave his phone. He simply did not do that. His father described waking up on countless mornings to find Nolan holding the camera directly in his face, laughing, as Elmore told him to get it away. The phone was inseparable from Nolan. He did not surrender it for a party, not for an island, not for any occasion. And then came the question of where the phone actually was. Nolan's phone was located through Snapchat location sharing, a feature commonly used among the friend group to track one another's whereabouts. The phone traced back not to Horn Island but to a friend's house. The individual associated with that house has been identified in public discussion of the case as Jax. Nolan's car was also parked at that location. When a family friend went to retrieve the phone, there was friction. The full nature of that friction has not been publicly explained in detail, but what is documented is that police were called to the scene before the phone was handed over. Officers arrived and then left. When Elmore Wells went to the house himself to collect Nolan's car and personal belongings, he arrived to find some of Nolan's other friends already at the door, agitated, knocking hard, demanding to be let inside. Elmore stepped in and settled them down. He understood that losing control at someone else's property would only create additional complications. He needed whoever was inside to open that door willingly. Eventually, Jax came downstairs. His appearance suggested he had recently been asleep. His first words to Nolan's grieving father were, "Nolan was like my brother." Elmore Wells did not argue. He responded with a composure that, under those circumstances, was extraordinary. He said, "If Nolan was like your brother, then please go and get everything he has so I can take his car and go home." Then came the key. Initially, no one at that house could say where Nolan's car key was, and then, without explanation, they could. The cell service question cannot be passed over lightly because it forms the structural foundation of the explanation offered for why Nolan was on that island without his phone. The friends said there was no reception. That was the reason they had the phone. That was the reason he stayed. But Nolan's family went to Horn Island and experienced it directly. They went with Coach Bramlett, Nolan's high school football coach, who offered his boat on the morning after Nolan went missing. The family docked, stepped off the boat, and walked the island on foot. While they were walking it, actively searching for any sign of Nolan, their phones functioned. Not weakly, not unreliably. Elmore's wife carried on an almost complete phone conversation with her grandmother during the search. Elmore himself received multiple calls while standing on that island. The same island where, according to Nolan's friends, cell service did not work. This is not a minor detail to be smoothed over. The cell service claim is the backbone of the explanation for why Nolan was without his phone. If service functions on that island, and the family's first-hand account demonstrates that it can and did, then the explanation offered by the friends does not hold. What the family also documented was the experience of trying to report Nolan missing in the hours before they ever reached the island. When they began making calls, they were passed between agencies in a loop that consumed critical hours. Ocean Springs Police said the situation fell outside their jurisdiction. The Department of Marine Resources said the same. Jackson County Sheriff's Office initially deflected the report as well. A family member described reaching a point of genuine disbelief, asking who exactly was supposed to help, and receiving no clear answer from anyone. Eventually, a Jackson County dispatcher got Ocean Springs Police on the line directly. After that conversation, Jackson County agreed to take the information. The location chosen for the handoff was a McDonald's parking lot. After midnight, the officer who received the report acknowledged it and moved on. The family described his response as carrying no visible urgency whatsoever. As far as they knew, no boats went onto the water that night to search for Nolan. The first vessels out there looking were the ones carrying his family and his coach. The search conducted by Nolan's family adds a dimension to this case that the letter's claims make impossible to ignore. They walked it. Their phones worked. They found nothing. The letter asserts that Nolan's body was brought back to Horn Island and placed there between 3 and 5 in the morning on that same date, July 6th, which would position the body's arrival in the hours just before or overlapping with when the family set out to search. If the letter's account carries any accuracy, Nolan may have been brought to the island and placed there during the very window when his family was preparing to go find him. That timing does not verify the letter's claims, but it renders the timeline plausible in a way that demands far more scrutiny than this case has been publicly afforded. The Coast Guard, Jackson County vessels, and helicopters eventually arrived on the scene. By that point, Elmore had already developed a conviction in his gut that Nolan was not on that island. He told a friend with a second boat that he did not want to go back out. He felt Nolan wasn't there. What he held on to through those hours was the possibility that his son was somewhere on the mainland, at someone's house, unreachable but alive. That hope did not survive what came next. His body was recovered. The family does not accept the framing of his death as a straightforward accident. The inconsistencies they identified from the very first night have never been adequately explained by any official account. A reward of $125,000 remains active for information that leads to answers in this case. And as of this recording, no one has been charged with anything in connection with Nolan's death. It is also, in cases like this, not as long as people tend to assume. Secrets carried by multiple people across multiple years do not tend to remain sealed indefinitely. They fracture along the lines of the relationships that hold them. The people believed to have knowledge of what happened on or around Horn Island that weekend were young, approximately 18 years old at the time. They are now in their 20s. They have lives forming around them, relationships deepening, connections building with people who were not there and who will, at some point, be told things. Every person who carries knowledge of what happened to Nolan Wells is also connected to siblings, parents, partners, friends, and in some cases people of faith they may one day confide in. The weight of a secret like this does not distribute evenly across time. It tends to concentrate, and at some point it becomes heavier than the fear of speaking. $125,000 is also not an abstract figure. For someone sitting on information right now, someone exhausted by 2 years of carrying it, someone watching what it has done to the people around them, that number represents a real possibility. It represents a way out. Coming forward is an option that remains open. What the letter, the family's documented statements, and the publicly established facts of this case create together is a portrait of an investigation that has not matched the gravity of what the evidence suggests may have occurred. A young man traveled to a remote barrier island off the coast of Mississippi with people he counted as friends. His body was recovered days later under circumstances that his family has never accepted as accurately characterized. The accounts provided by those who were with him contain documented contradictions. The family's direct experience on Horn Island undermines one of the central claims made to explain his death. A letter has now surfaced describing a level of deliberate concealment and staged recovery that, if accurate, transforms this from a tragic accident into something far more calculated. And Nolan Wells, by every account from every person who knew him, was the last person in that group who should have ended up the one who did not come home. He was the one who stepped in when things got physical. He was the one who forgave. He was the one who did not hold on to resentment. He was the one who kept the peace. Every person in that group who had a history of volatility, of aggression, of conflict, they came home. The peacemaker did not. Elmore Wells woke up to his son's camera in his face more mornings than he can count. He would tell Nolan to get that phone away from him. And Nolan would laugh. That is the Nolan his father carries. The laughing one. The one with the camera. The one who was quietly, carefully protecting his future on the very night that the letter describes. Drinking almost nothing. Watching himself. Thinking about next season. Thinking about what came after Horn Island. There was supposed to be a next for Nolan. He was building toward it. The $125,000 reward is still waiting. The letter is still circulating. The family is still asking questions that have not been answered. And somewhere, the truth about what happened on or around Horn Island that 4th of July weekend is still being carried by people who know what it is. It always surfaces eventually. It always does. If you have stayed with this story from the beginning of this video to this moment, you already understand why this case matters and why it cannot be allowed to disappear. Nolan Xavier Wells was someone's son, someone's reason to laugh before the day even started. His family has fought for him publicly, carefully, and with a dignity that the circumstances did not make easy to maintain. Like this video so that more people find it, and subscribe to Unrivaled True Crime if you are not already part of this community. Every view this video receives is another set of eyes on a case that desperately needs them. We are not done with Nolan's story. We will continue covering it for as long as there are questions that have not been answered. And right now, 2 years on, there are far too many. Stay with us.